Cool. Hi, I'm PJ. This is our final presentation of all our friends. Everybody wave. The final project is brought to you by Language, Logic, and Persuasion Group number 2, PJ, Ernesto, Stetson, Angelina, Lauren, and Chad. We all work to write about our thoughts on this piece, and we talk extensively about our approach to this final group project. Angelina and Ernesto,
Ernesto.
put together the final outline of our thoughts, and Stetson was in charge of editing and completing the video component.
Today we will be discussing the Munk debate on political correctness. This topic has been the subject of much debate and controversy in recent years. Political correctness is the idea that certain words, phrases, and actions should be avoided in order to avoid offending or marginalizing certain groups of people. While the idea may seem simple on the surface, the issue of political correctness has sparked debate and disagreement among many people. In the Munk debate about political correctness, you can see the side arguing for it. Michael Eric Dyson, a professor of sociology at Georgetown University, and Michelle Goldberg, a columnist for the New York Times and best-selling author, talk about how political correctness is an essential tool for promoting inclusivity and respect for all individuals. And the side arguing against, Jordan Peterson, a professor of psychology at the University of Toronto, clinical psychologist and author, and Stephen Fry, a journalist and well-known actor, and they talk about how political correctness has gone too far.
Okay, the one main argument that we focused on was that it seems that throughout the debate, both sides seem to agree that censorship is where political correctness can cause problems. Specifically, Stephen Fry argues that society, when battling or talking about political correctness, they focus too much on the small issues, such as mislabeling someone. And he uses himself as an example because he's a gay man, and he doesn't really care when people use slurs against him, like the F word. And he continues to say that we should not be focusing on the use of specific words. That Fry's views, this is a waste of time because language is subjective to every specific individual. Instead of that, society should focus on the big issues and overall just try to be nice and kind to each other. Throughout this debate, it really just turns into a left versus the right and really fails to focus on the topic of political correctness. Many times just focusing on political issues. And throughout the debate, Stephen Fry even brings that up. He says that that they're not even arguing on the topic, they're just arguing politics. And at one point, quote, he says, "Fuck political correctness, resist, fight. If you have a point of view, fight in the proper manner, using democracy as it should be, not channels of education, not language. It's so silly."
And the certain debater's rebuttal that we wanted to focus on was Dyson's rebuttal after he said this. Dyson's rebuttal to this specific quote was to talk about the resources that oppressed people are not given. He says this because when Fry says that quote and he starts discussing why Trump and Brexit have power is because of the catastrophic failure of the left, not because of the right. He says this to talk about and he wants to emphasize the fact that political correctness empirically is not working for these countries because of those powers. Dyson says that the oppressors benefit from the work of the oppressed and then wonder why the oppressed can't just work harder and do better for themselves. Using slaves as an example, like he does throughout the debate, Dyson explains that when you suddenly free people, they do not also suddenly have skills or resources to do better for themselves. And the final quote from Dyson's rebuttal that we chose that we really feels like emphasizes and like is the main point for his whole rebuttal is that treating members of different groups differently is not treating people as individuals, which is a big argument piece for the right side or the con of this argument. saying that like political correctness takes away individualism.
Yeah, and that was that was Peterson's his opening statement that said that we're moving more towards tribalism and focusing more on the demographics that we hold rather than the individual identities that we have.
Yeah, and I feel like Goldberg and Dyson are repeatedly trying to say like, yes, like these group identities exist, but the like marginalized identities are desperately trying to be seen as individuals as more than that, and not just being seen like Dyson, I think at one point talks about specifically actually in his rebuttal to Fry when he said the other things that we quoted. He says like, I don't want to be treated as like if I'm a 12-year-old black man or black boy in a park, like I don't want to be like shot just for like being there because I am in the group of like black people and not an individual person who's just a 12-year-old boy like playing at a park, you know what I mean? So
I feel like Professor Chad, he told us that if they were to come into this debate having talked before, would they have changed their minds more, you know? But I feel like Dyson and Peterson, also Michelle made a lot of comments towards Peterson, so they came in, I think, with some personal feelings already, and I think
it
that's
definitely
what
got heated.
It reminds me of our discussions and assignments in class when we talked about the way emotions play a role in our capacity to argue effectively. And I feel like, yes, you can take that both ways. Like it can either be a positive thing or a negative thing. And I think that this debate is a great example of it being a negative thing because it kind of just goes off the rails the second that it becomes personal. And you can tell those emotions come into it. And then as a viewer, you can tell it just becomes more and more disorganized as time goes on then, and it's hard to recover almost from that.
Yeah,
they don't recover from it.
It just becomes about trying to discount the other person. I mean, again, like it just literally because of the personal affiliation, they start to see each other, and it's like, oh, you know, this argument that we're having right now reminds me of this other argument that we've had in the past about this thing and how wrong you were about that. Look at this. Look how wrong you are again. Yeah. It's just, again, going back to those personal jabs, you know?
Yeah. One thing I will commend Fry on is I did like, especially, and like, I think we all agreed that like the opening statements were really pretty strong, but that in Fry's opening statement, he talks about like his willingness, and I mean, I guess who knows if it was genuine or not, but it seemed genuine, his willingness to like be persuaded, you know, be convinced that maybe, you know, he doesn't fully understand what political correctness is, or that maybe it is a good thing, you know what I mean? And so I do commend him for that, but I do agree that at a certain point they all got far. I think that like Peterson started to maybe get heated at some point. I feel like he was maybe the first to get a little frustrated, but then yeah, they just definitely like threw fuel on that fire and just like made it way worse than it needed to be. So
agreed. Yeah, I think that Stephen Fry, is it Stephen Fry or Stephen? Stephen Fry. He actually him and also Dyson, they both bring up what we talked about earlier and making it emotional. They use like comedy to kind of like calm things down, but also to also bring in the audience on their side.
Yeah.
But another thing I wanted to bring up is that even Fry mentions that when they start speaking about politics, he says that he's even on their side. He's like a soft lefty, but he's still on their side. So what they're arguing, he's actually for. So I think the one that was just far right was Peterson, right?
Well, I mean, he said you don't know my like. He was like, I'm not. So I wouldn't say he was, but
fair enough. Well, so if we want to bring it back to the original idea that we had, if we are to isolate the argument made by Fry, we believe that it fails. For Fry to suggest that people should do the proper manner using democracy, it is a disservice to the disenfranchised population that Dyson defends immediately after this comment. Dyson explains in depth that the disadvantages that these ideas are potentially harmful towards, but also fails to bring up a very important point that we have talked about, and it is the proper manner that Fry is referring to has been developed by the traditionally cisgendered white male for many years, both in the UK and the US. For Fry to suggest this change is the most appropriate when it is done in a manner that suits the demographic that helps powerful people over many generations is an inappropriate argument in and of itself. Then ultimately, we said that we think that all the arguments of the debate fail. The speakers begin with pointed and powerful opening statements that set the debate up to follow the proposed topic. This quickly dissolves when the speakers begin speaking from an emotional and defensive place. Because of this, the arguers fail to persuade the other debaters and end up losing the audience's attention as it pertains to the proposed topic. If the speakers were to confer with their partners and have a solid determination of what political correctness is, as far as they determine it, they would have been more effective and could have had some sort of success.
Good job.
Absolutely.
And that's it. That's the show.
That's it.
We
That's
did
a
it.
wrap.
That's group 2,
Wow.
presentation
Conclusion.
3, baby.
Thanks for tuning in.